Ed, welcome to the Unmaking. Where are we parked and what's the significance of this location to you?
We are parked at my house. This is the end of Peninsula Bay in Wānaka. And I was lucky enough to buy this as a bare section in 2019. And this, the land itself, the house and everything around it it's like the culmination of my personal and professional life made real. Sian and I and the kids even built this up from a piece of bare land, and it's a pretty good reflection of who we are as a family now. I pinch myself every day that I get to call this home. It's the most spectacular piece of land. I have mountain bike trails around the house. We have a little micro mini ramp on the driveway. I thought, as a skateboarder, it's criminal to pour concrete on a driveway and not bend it up at the corners. The house we built it together with a lot of people from the skiing and snowboarding industry from around Wānaka and the Southern Lakes. So there's quite a deep connection to the community and all of the things we've put into it. And there's action and adventure sports aren't traditionally industries, when you follow a passion like that build things like this. It looks quite opulent from the outside looking in, but we've both Sian and I have worked hard and been successful, and the idea of showing my 21-year-old scrotty seasonaire self this house and saying, you'll still love skateboarding, you'll still live close to the mountains, you'll be mountain biking, enjoying life with your kids, it's pretty special. And this, yeah.
You would have bitten your arm off, I'm sure, at that point.
I can't, yeah. I do pretty much every day. I thank my lucky stars that I live here.
Looking at a sport like snowboarding, you can't get that time back. You know, that time is gone forever. That was just a capsule, and some of us got to experience it but there's other sports and other things now that are in exactly that same phase that snowboarding was in the sort of, early 90s or...
I'm fascinated by this. The further I get from that, the more I look at it. Is there anything, I look at what my kids are into, is there anything that offers that freedom? My great worry with snowboarding now, when I go to competitions, is that the DJ's in his 40s, the speakers in their 40s, the organisers in their 40s and 50s. When snowboarding had that golden age in the 90s and early 2000s, snowboarders ran it. There were very few. There were a couple of people in their 40s who ran the shops or the distribution hubs who had that business acumen. But most people running comps, running brands were 20s and 30s. They were people like us. And there was a sense of ownership. And I look now at things my kids are into. Oscar was into trampoline for a while, and that had it. But there was a sort of... he shunned it. It had a kind of gym nerdiness to it. It's hard. I haven't seen, there's that sort of weird Norwegian cliff jumping belly flopping thing that feels like it's got a bit of that.
It's pretty punk. Yeah.
But it's at the same time, it's almost a bit gimmicky. It's like, how can you build a culture around that? Whereas I look at what snowboarding and freeskiing have done, and skateboarding, like surfing, all of mountain biking, all of those worlds we live in, and all of those sports had that nucleus, the germination in the mid-90s, and they've flourished into these incredibly rich cultures, multi-generational, and they've given me a profession, they've given me wife, friends, and this incredible life that I live now. Like Wānaka as a town, I think, is built on this. Like you look at the friendships people have, and they come from that late 90s, early 2000s when the town was establishing itself. And those bonds are so strong between people.
What do you think with looking at action sports, and particularly those ones that have gone into the Olympic family? Who's handled it the best, or which sport has come out of that the best as a sport, or the least scathed by the collateral damage that going into that system can do to a sport?
It's such a huge, broad-reaching question, because only snowboarding as an action sport, I think, has total immersion with the IOC, in the sense that almost every facet has been sucked into the Olympic engine now. Skateboarding was competing for skateboarding was only ever a part-time thing. Like the filming, the act itself, the music, the art, those elements are so much richer and more important to skateboarding than winning a competition.
And did they try to do that with the UCI initially with skateboarding?
I think
it was some really weird kind of like even more weird than snowboarding and skiing.
There was a
strange
weird
bedfellows. It's like
weird battle. UCI wanted it. The bigger battle was between roller sports, World Roller Skate, I think it's called.
Which would have been inline skating and roller skating
And
kind
actual,
of initially ending
four-wheel.
at some point. Yeah.
And then there was World Skate came through. So I think you see Roller Skate acts as a parent company to the World Skate Federation. So from what I've seen and the people I've spoken to, World Skate has almost autonomy. Apparently there's some kind of Don Corleone figure in the Roller Federation who's kind of like, look, you guys are successful. You're doing it right as far as I'm concerned. Do what you need to do. So he's a bit kind of heavy hitter, but he's not getting bogged down in the politics or the handling of the sport. He's like, I trust you, get on with it. And I think skate is very happy with that. And so we get into these worlds. Snowboarding has been a part of the Olympics since '98. Sort of the middle of the golden era. If you look at the golden era of snowboarding from 92 to, what should we say, 07, 10, maybe that's when a lot of the parent companies started to get involved in those rider-owned companies. So even as the sport grew and it generated more money, less money was flowing down to snowboarding. More was going upstairs to boardrooms and parent companies. So there's this, you've got that financial model changing. From 1998 in Nagano, when snowboarding entered the Olympics, to Livigno, more snowboarding as this very, very core activity has found itself getting more and more corporatized. Bigger companies, more boardrooms, less snowboarders at the top of the industry. There are still snowboarders there, but they have less power. And then at the same time, you've got the Olympic cycle starting to dominate the external financial interests in the sport. So you start to see, if you go and look at who gets the bulk of non-endemic sponsorship, and it's the 3 medalists in each discipline from the last Olympic cycle.
By non-endemic, you mean outside of the industry?
Google.
So
Yeah.
Audi, automotive, those kind of things, not industry. Yeah, got it.
Yeah, all of those huge, huge sponsorship deals just go to the Eileen Goos, to the Shaun Whites, anyone who's medalled previously. Rather than companies dipping their toe in snowboarding every year, they now dip their toe in for 6 months, 3 months prior and 3 months post Winter Olympics with just the medalists. So the sport is poorer, would be my first big statement. The core sport is poorer for its Olympic involvement, but it has a stronger identity, if that makes sense. It's compartmentalized the Olympic side of things, and even though it's on less money, it's cleaned out a lot of the fluff that was kind of hanging around, and now you have core snowboarders and core snowboard brands back at the heart of it, working things like natural selection. Yes, there's X Games and Snow League, and that's all very new on the competitive landscape, and we'll have to see where that lands. But the rich part of the culture, where people are filming, where people are like really looking at the way people snowboard, the equipment that we use, that feels more diverse and richer than ever to me at the moment. Like, you have small companies like Karua, Amplid. You have bigger brands like Burton have always been there. They put a lot of money into their kit, but Salomon have this specific snowboard division that's working really hard. There's a lot of really good product out there being made well. And I think that's to the benefit of your average snowboarder. There's some really good films being made, lovely little series that are representing what snowboarding means to people. And I think social media has democratized, taken away those gatekeepers, which were the big magazines and filmmakers, Transworld Snowboarder, and then in the film side of things, Mac Dog, Standard, Absinthe. Those guys acted as gatekeepers for who could get through. And now you look at some of the riders who can explode without the need for big brand backing or like a tick of approval from one of those singular god makers like Justin Hosneck, Brusty, Mike McIntyre or the Hatchet Brothers.
Just on the basis of a few clips that they've shot with their friends and basically, and then that will then, if that gets enough traction on social media, that will get them a sponsorship or an invite to an event or, yeah.
I think you probably, he may have had a couple of video parts, but I always think of Scott Stevens, Sleepy Stevens. Go and, if you've never come across him, go and look him up on Instagram as one of the guys who really did that. And even he did have some big film parts, but he realised that social media gave him the opportunity to explore and indulge in this completely different form of snowboarding that a big film production probably wouldn't let him do. And he was able to chase this incredibly strange, almost the closest thing snowboarding has to Rodney Mullen, I think, in that sort of, I'm going to go and explore the weird things you can do. Put one screw in your binding bolt so that you can shove it the board. You can spin the board around the bottom of the binding. Lots of 1 foot tricks using trampolines or just weird balance tricks. And that's beautiful. That's what we need. Like, the more you have people exploring these different limitations, the better it is for the sport, because the more it will appeal to more creative people. The Olympics quashes the spontaneity and the creativity in the sport, despite the judges' best efforts. And there is a lot of work going in by the federations and the judges, the athletes themselves, coaches, to try and maintain that degree of creativity. But it's very, very difficult in structured competition, I think.
And organising events in Italy also brings some challenges with it, right? In terms of getting some of the things there. I remember World Championships that we organised back around 2000, 2001 in Zapata, and that was not easy in terms of those commitments that are made. And I understand that was one of the problems with that. Was it the Big Air course or the slope course that they didn't get to do a proper practice run, or the organisers didn't do a proper practice run, and so the course builder that would have built the course said, okay, well, then I'm out.
There's so many different layers to it. There was excellent snowmaking conditions in November, but I think the budgets, as they do with all Olympics, were blowing out. So Livigno hadn't been given the check to start the snow machines blowing, and they blew a phenomenal amount of snow in the end, but they blew it very late. Larks, just over the border, an hour and a half northwest, had blown, I think, 90% of the snow they needed for all of their snow parks in November. But there was no check for that. So the snow was blown really late. There was no test event, so all of the original designs for a very creative course were jettisoned. They built a tunnel under the wrong jump. They built it under the second jump, not under the third jump on the course. So that changed the angles and the geometry. So that's the background. There wasn't enough funding released early enough to get the course in and test it properly. Then you had very abnormal weather conditions that meant that you saw very warm temperatures, which for the men, they can kind of get through more mass. They can carry a bit more speed. But for the women, especially when you have some of those Japanese riders, Anagasa, the Austrian rider, they're in the kind of late 40s, early 50 kgs. And they're like feathers once they're airborne. And when they land, if they're not in exactly the right spot, then carrying speed to the next jump is a real issue. And so you had all of that as background, and then the judges watch training, and 360s and 720s looked like the biggest tricks or the normal tricks we were going to see. But as the course ran in, so they set their scale, there is a thinking, and this is allegedly, I don't want any comeback on this, so let's use that word. Allegedly, what happened was, there's a thing around optics where no one wants to, or rather FIS don't want to see someone win an Olympic gold medal with a 75-point score. So in those conditions where you've only got a 360 or a 720 possible, the judges will change the score.
So they'll set the scale that, okay, the scale needs to go up. Right.
Exactly. So they would have, where a 360 would score in the, like on sector by sector, each individual obstacle being judged, maybe a 50, and a 720 might score, or that would even be higher, might even be a 4. So it's an out of 10. So a 360 might score a 4, a 720 might score a 6 at highest, because you've got to have a 900, a 1080, a 1260, 1440 all catered for in there. So they bumped that scale up, and that meant when the course ran in and got faster and you started seeing 1080s, then 1260s, and then triple cork jumps, the scale was broken.
They had nowhere to go, basically.
They were midway through the second run in the women's slope style, and they'd maxed out the second jump score. So then they start borrowing points from the overall composition. They're like, I need another 1.5 points chucked in there. So the point did come. I did check this with the judges. The point came, but the system was broken by then, and they were at sea.
Yeah,
I think is the fair way to put it. And there were too many questions. I actually think the result was very close to right. I wouldn't have changed much, but it obviously there were, if you were trying to tell the story and you were picking apart the scores as a commentator like us, it looked broken and you couldn't tell that story. So you start asking questions, and then the controversy starts.
And you guys were very considered in terms of taking your time, figuring out, okay, well, what are we going to say? We need to say something, we think, but don't want to be too, reactive or, Todd Richards style, just basically blow it all up, lob the grenades, and everyone else can deal with the aftermath.
And Todd's style is not my style.
Well, I understand the frustration after so long, because for me, part of it's a respect to the sport, that the organisation don't care enough about the sport to ensure after almost 30 years that they get that shit right, And it's the thing, because there's enough people in the room that know all that stuff, that know the factors, that know what you need to do to organise a perfect event, to have perfect judging. So why can't this happen?
And the judges, to the judges' credit, 18 months, their sector by sector judges had sat in the same positions. So season in, season out, comp in, comp out, they had seen all of those runs developing towards the Olympics. They knew what should have gone down, but all of those pre-factors were the symptoms, and rather were the cause, and then the judging criteria in that last moment was the symptom that showed itself and got lasered by the critics. And I understand Todd's reaction. I do. And there's a part of me that likes it. I like that he goes in two-footed, Roy Keane style, just smash it up. But I do think my sadness with it is that if you're Zoe, you're Kokomo, or you're Mary, that controversy mars the medal. And that isn't fair, because they rode their hearts out in horrible conditions. A competition that's not going to let you show your best, you're still battling it out. And that's hard. I don't think that's fair.
Yeah, no, fully agreed there. With so coming back to the question, is it skateboarding that was done the best, or that you would say, okay, has come away the least harmed from the Olympic embrace? Well, mountain biking, BMX, mountain biking's already in there. It's all cross country kind of stuff, right? It's
cross country is so easy because it fits the higher, faster, stronger model, and I do think. What is it? It's not just higher, faster. I should know that after 10 Olympics.
In terms of the values, the Olympic values?
Yeah,
well, I think theoretically that's what they're testing, isn't it, right?
Yeah, and that's the uneasy relationship with action sports. Surfing, I think, has got in, if that builds the model for free ride, skiing and snowboarding, they have a weather window. They go to incredible spots. I mean, Japan was growing pains. Skateboarding, it's there. Jury's out on skateboarding for me. I think the street does work, but it's so far away from what skateboarding is to skateboarders. But I'd argue the same maybe with snowboarding. Like who does 1980s? Who like? But what we did see, what I don't think you could argue with, is that we saw. Okay, the slope was dreadful. Pound for pound, we saw the best men's half-pipe final ever at the Olympics. So you had a shit show of a slope, and then you had the best men's half-pipe final of all time. Like, you couldn't have written a better script. And that, I'm still getting goosebumps thinking about that. That was exquisite for
The drama.
me. And I think a lot of people, like, the pipe is the downhill for skiing or mountain biking. That's our... Super pipe is the equivalent.
It's the men's 100 metres, right, at the Olympics, essentially.
And that was brilliant. Yeah. So maybe... And, yeah, my two favourite events are men's super pipe and women's slope style, because you're seeing the 5 or 6 top athletes, and when they're all there are 5 or 6 who can do it, and they're all pulling the sport in different directions. And women's slope, you've got very different rotations, very different rails being explored. Men's pipe, you've got so many different access and tricks still this far down the track being explored, with Cam Melville Ives turning up and doing all of those different, like, rodeo, alley-oop, switch, double variations. Scotty James experimenting with switch backside 16s, and then still the big hitting down the pipe, toe edge 1440s from Yuki. I want to say Yuki Kodono. I can't remember his name. That's terrible. I've got toe blank. But I don't think maybe skate has that with street, but it's not pound for pound. They're not the best street skaters in the world. Street skating in its classic setting of kind of video parts is not represented by the insane consistent, actually maybe Niger's there, but the insane consistency you need for competitive world skate competitions, and the sort of sterile rails that you hit are at odds with that creativity and the way you find this odd spot and turn it into something that no one's seen.
You can come out of the bowl and up onto the shelf that basically is not part of the design at all, or the back rail or whatever.
Yeah, or there's a weird brick bank that means that the run into this spot is insanely difficult, so you've got to find a way around that. Or there's a brilliant run out that gives you another element to the trick, or it's actually a normal barrier, but it's the way you exit off that barrier and have got to navigate your way across a canal onto another deck. It's those weird things that real life pops up that you can't replicate. I think Paris and the way they approached the games as a whole they could have gone off the map and built a mobile street skate contest around Paris, where you'd have kind of guerrilla spots popping up. If they'd really embraced that the city is the venues, which was beautiful. It was by far the best Olympics I've ever been to. It was magical in the way they didn't have these sterile stadiums. You went to these stunning landmarks. And London 2012 had tried it, but I think Paris got a lot closer to it. If they'd have used street skateboarding in that way to immerse it in the city's history and heritage, which it has so much, it would have been perfect. But instead, we got a beautiful venue, but it was very Olympic.
You've been around snow sports now for a super long time. You kind of, when you started, were you consciously building a CV, for want of a better word, or were you just basically saying yes to opportunities? Were you just taking a chance and blagging your way into things? How was it working back in the early days?
That's a great question. Right, total honesty, I remember being about 13 or 14 and thinking, I want to be famous. I suppose it's the equivalent of a kid today saying, I want to be a YouTuber.
Influencer, or yes, yeah.
I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I had that in me. And it's embarrassing to admit, I think, now, but I liked the sound of my own voice. I felt like I had something to say, and I think through, like, my family, my grandparents, parents taught me, and my brothers and sister taught me. We were an enthusiastic, passionate family. The whole family, like, my grandparents were into sailing. My dad was into motorbikes and cars and sailing, and they built a dry ski slope close to the house, and he was like, right, he'd seen Ski Sunday, the BBC show, and he's like, right, we're all going skiing. And we sort of made things happen, and I had this passion and energy for things, and skateboarding and snowboarding put themselves in front of me and offered this opportunity. And it was total accident. I tried to front flip off a bar in Val d'Isère the night before a big air contest, and x-rays would later suggest that I broke my neck. At the time, without any money, and thinking I just had a sore neck and I was going to wait and ride it out. So the next day I went up and emceed this big air competition, and I really enjoyed it. I liken those early days where you've just got a crowd and a microphone. It's like stand up with a safety net, because you can test out ideas, say what you like, shout some random offensive stuff, or roast people, good friends that you knew, you're roasting them, but you've always got the action to fall back on. So if something didn't land, if it wasn't funny, if no one got it, then you just come back and quickly start talking about the action.
Describing what's happening rather than actually freestyling or... Yeah.
Talking about the formats, the judges, the scores, but you can test out this material. And I would call that period, that emceeing period, from, I first did that in 1995 through till about 98, 99, my university in broadcasting and events. Starting to understand how events were built, how the running orders, how you tell a story to this crowd in front of you. And a lot of times that was in a period when snowboarding had a lot of money. It was starting to find inner city events. So if you're emceeing one of those, you're in front of a crowd who might be their first time seeing snowboarding in the flesh. So you had to explain without alienating the athletes and the core that who's the credibility. You rely on having credibility with them to be re-employed, but you've got to let the mainstream audience understand what's going on. And that was critical for me. Without those years in the trenches doing the live events, I wouldn't have made it onto the BBC.
But you were getting those gigs by actually organising the events themselves, or being involved with that? Or were you actually, hey, I'm a freelance MC, commentator, hype man, book me? Or how were you getting those gigs back then?
No, I did. So the first gig I did that big air was the British Championships. And I started realising that I was a terminally mediocre pro. I had designs on being a great pro, but by 97, and I had done I'd competed in a couple of Brits, but then I realised that I started getting knee injuries. I wasn't going to be the best, and people started asking me just at the British Championships to do a bit more and a bit more. So I started doing a bit more of the emceeing, and then I broke my knee, and I think subconsciously I knew I'd maybe let that happen slightly somewhere deep down, because I wanted to start using my brain more. I was windsurfing instructing in the summers and then just coasting. I'd managed to put enough money together, windsurf instructing and then working in snowboard shops in the autumn to then not have to work December to April. And I was finding a few things to dool around. I wanted to keep that winter free to try and focus on snowboarding, but actually I was partying too much. I was kind of getting a bit too loose, and I broke my knee as a result of that, not looking after myself, and that gave me an into journalism. I'd been writing about the adventures I was having for some of the mags, and the moment I started doing the magazine, I was going out and doing comp reports, and I wasn't in a rider capacity, so people started handing me the mic more. And so I was there. It wasn't a professional thing. It was just I was the right person there. I was the best option who was there. And if you're in Europe, a lot of time, it's an odd thing, but in Europe especially, they feel like it legitimizes the competition if you've got an English language speaker. Even if you're in France,
a native English, right? It's like either a Brit or probably more a Brit rather than an American voice.
They would have taken Americans if they could get them, but very few people are regularly on that side of the Atlantic. So it made sense in all the comps I did in Sweden and Norway, the Scandinavian comps, everyone spoke English and it was wonderful. You'd have a great rapport there. In France, Switzerland and Austria, there was high level of English, but I was embarrassed. I had a little bit of French I could get by and mess around with, but Italy, I was always so embarrassed in Italy because the crowd had nothing usually. You were commentating for the riders at that stage. But it grew steadily, and by 2001, 2002, I was doing little bits of TV and almost every major snowboard competition. Air and Style, US Open, the Battle, O'Neill Evolution, the SB Jam, everything that was out there.
Those core events then for core audience rather than real mainstream broadcast. So was that first BBC then? Was that the first you'd say mainstream, or you already doing?
I hadn't had any mainstream at that stage. I think X Games went to Barcelona in about 2004, and I got called in to do the commentary on that, and that was when it was still Grandstand, which was a sort of 4-hour-long Saturday afternoon sports show. And they did this foray into X Games, and they just didn't know how to cover it. They didn't understand any of it, and it was chaos. It was a really bad representation, and it burned their fingers, I think. Nothing came back after that until the Olympics in 2006 was when there was a guy commentated in 2002 on the Olympics for the BBC who really didn't know what he was doing. And I'd established myself enough by that stage, and I'd got my first regular TV gig. I had one in 2001 for the Turner Broadcasting Corporation, Ted Turner. He'd got CNN for the news, and he got Cartoon Network for the kids. And he had an idea that he could do CNX, would be a tweens and teens channel. And they were doing focus groups around London to see what would hit with those people. And we got called as the action sports guys. I'd got an emceeing company at that stage with an American guy called Christian Stevenson that we called Laughing Gear. And we would run, if you needed an action sports MC crew, we'd do that. We had a radio show on Wednesday nights called the Rock Copter above a pub in Fulham. And Marianne Faithfull was a regular in the pub downstairs. We used to get her upstairs, talk about what was it. I still can't believe we did this. God rest Marianne Faithfull's soul. We used to get her in to talk about what would make a good penis. You've seen a few, Marianne. And we'd have we just had fun with stuff, and we'd cover a lot of different avenues. We'd be doing vert ramps, big festivals like V Festival, Monsters of Rock, Donington, Reading and Leeds. We'd do all of these. If they had a vert ramp there, we'd perfected the art of making action sports palatable to mainstream audiences, making it fun. And so we got called in for this focus group, and about 2 weeks later, the guy who'd run the focus group, who was a mate, was like, look, I showed it to everyone and you guys have got the gig. And it was 3 days a week in London, and it allowed me to cut my teeth as a TV presenter, knock off all the corners. So you're just in front of a camera doing links, pre-recorded links, and it's TV with training wheels, really, because you just get used to speaking to a lens and remembering lines and working out how best to structure things so you can do it naturally. Like, do you read verbatim off a script and memorize that, or do you just give yourself 3 bullet points that you go, okay, I need to get from here to here and say these things in between? And we did a year of that, and it got ditched. See Turner Broadcasting like, this doesn't work. But then in that time, some friends from Wales had set up Free Sports on 4. One of the first ad-funded broadcasting models. So they got a half-hour slot with Channel 4 on Sunday mornings, and they went out and sold that to events around the UK. So Red Bull would buy 3 slots and say, okay, we'll do 3 Degrees, the BMX comp, we'll do Masters of Dirt, we'll do that. So we did the Cold Water Classic for O'Neill, but that got me covering sport on in sort of broadcast territory that I was familiar with and felt like I had some agency with. And I built up, we won an RTS award for coverage of different action sports. It was really good grounding and foundation in TV. And I started, again, I was looking at how people were organising competitions and how we fitted in as a broadcaster. Just so many, it's such a long, convoluted answer, isn't it? But the short way of looking at it is that I was coming in, I'd had, in between all of this, between probably 99 and 2002, I'd set up an event management company with friends, and it went bankrupt pretty quickly. We hitched our wagon to a music festival and ran the snowboard on the side of that, and we were very naive, not commercially savvy, but extremely passionate, and we learned an awful lot through that, but ultimately got our fingers quite badly burned. But having
was it a scaffolding event kind of thing, or what sort of event was it?
It was called Union Event Management, and we ran very good grassroots events. So our biggest success with it, we built the AIM series, which stood for Artificial Indoor and Mountain, and we built a grassroots snowboard tour that came from dry slopes, indoor snow domes, out to the British Championships in the mountains. And we built a really well-branded, coherent grassroots series that took you up to the Brits, that would then, in theory, launch you into the European competitions and then up to the mainstream. And I will still credit the rapid success of riders like Billy Morgan, Sparrow Knox, Jamie Nichols, and even at its tail end, Mia Brooks, with coming through that system. But then we started trying to run bigger events. And I look at now, going back, one of my many roles is running an events production company, and looking at how naive we were, I'm amazed that it lasted the 3-4 years that it did. But it was the commercial side of it. It looked to us like there was a lot of money flowing around in the sport at that time, and we just didn't quite have, I don't think we could build the trust or instill trust in big brands for them to start writing the 6-figure checks which we saw out there. If we'd have set our sights smaller and built more organically, we maybe would have had more success. But we tried to run before we walked, I think.
Shoulda, woulda, coulda. Hindsight's always a fine thing, right, with those sorts of ventures, and also what you learn later on in terms of what you know through that professional evolution that you've gone through.
Oh, my wife would call it a nervous breakdown. I was rocking in the bath one night at how much money was going out and how little was coming in. And learning to say no from that was massive. And that was actually over the course of a decade, but that was the beginning of it, saying yes too much and taking too much on, and then finding your limit physically and mentally, which as a freelancer I think is the constant conundrum. Like, I'm there now. I've said yes to a few too many things, but the early warning signs are there, and I've got the bandwidth and experience to be able to deal with it. And if I look back on the happiest professional and personal periods, they're the ones where I've said no more often.
How do you know that? How do you know at the time in terms of, okay, this is in the no category, this is a maybe, this is a yes, or depending on everything else that I've got going on currently? Because that's the thing. I look at the various things that you've got going on, and there's a lot, but it's also it's a lot that's it's extremely variable. So it's not like, okay, it's Tuesday, this is happening. It's like, you don't know. A lot of that's going to be weather dependent. That might change entirely within 24 hours. So how do you manage that for yourself?
I think it's having more experience. I think the key thing one of the most important things I've learned is that even though it looks on the surface like everything you do is quite individual, the greatest successes and the work I'm most proud of have come from brilliant teams. So it's working with people that you really trust and who you understand and understand you. When I first moved down here to New Zealand, it was in the back of my mind to start building something. I wasn't even sure what that was. Was it going to be a media production company? Would it be events production? Would it be something much bigger? Would I just run something small on my own? And I took a lot of time and looked at a lot of different options. But it was actually teaming up with Sophie Luther, someone who has a very different skill set to me, that made the most sense. She's so good at all the things I'm not good at. She's also really good at a lot of the things I am good at. But critically, the working relationship looked like Sophie full-time with me at a quarter or a third or sometimes half-time. Every now and again full-time. But it's such a brilliant working relationship, and it's called All Good Productions. It's a broad-ranging production company. We do little content gigs or we do big event gigs. But the way Soph works, she's incredibly capable Swiss Army knife, who's a weapon with a spreadsheet and loves the details, can run a budget, and it lets me do a lot more of the conceptual kind of ideas based stuff. And there's a few areas that, like, whether it's contacts, whether it's sort of building broadcast teams, there's areas that I do, but having that freedom to work the way we do is magical.
Did you figure that out organically, or was there a plan at the beginning and when you said, okay, no, this is how it's going to work, or was that a sort of process of evolution to get where you are now in terms of how that rolls?
I think it was organic. There was a little bit of chat about it, but as we started, we got a pretty big project straight off the bat. We met through Winter Games down here and really liked the way each other worked. We'd been running the broadcast marketing and comms side of things, and that was really making a lot of sense. And we were like, okay, there's something here. We can do this. And then Soph's got really deep ties in mountain biking, and through the connection between Travis Rice and Rod Drury, the natural selection where I intersected, we started to look at
Travis Rice and Rod Drury. I haven't quite made that jump yet.
They'd made that connection themselves.
The two of them?
Yeah. They'd started to talk to each other. And then because I was down here and working on natural selection, it was like, okay, that triangle started to develop. And that was lovely. It was really organic. That was like, okay, there's something here. Rod wanted to make something happen for Queenstown. Travis was looking to expand natural selection beyond just snowboarding. You're
already working with Travis in the snowboarding natural selection tour, right?
So we started, Rod, I took Sophie in. I was like, okay, I need someone with your contact book around the Southern Lakes and understanding of budgets and consent and processes down here to help me see if this is possible. And Rod came in with blue sky thinking, like, okay, I'd like to make this happen. What's it going to take? And together we started to work out what that could be, where it would happen and what it would look like. And All Good for me was very much a product of my existing working model collapsing during COVID. That was, for anyone freelance, that was quite a nerve-wracking time. And no matter how big and successful you look on the outside, I'm sure you know it, as a freelancer, you're only a couple of jobs away from starting to look through the back of the paper and the job market. So you're like, okay. I was impressed with how the action and adventure sport kind of media landscape did rally through COVID. There were small intermittent jobs, and the BBC were fantastic. We were Ski Sunday, my pot boiler job, through January, February.
Which you've been doing since 2006?
2007.
2007.
Celebrated 20 years in January, February this year on that show. And we were the only... Shemi, my co-host, was in France, so could travel through Europe. And if you had MIQ, remember Managed Isolation Quarantine, unbelievably, I did 2 trips out during that period, and unbelievably, there were lapses in the queue for MIQ at the times I was offered both trips, the Tokyo Olympics and Ski Sunday.
So you could slot back in, or you couldn't get in.
I know I got slots within a week of those jobs ending.
Awesome.
And I was able to get in and out. So Chris Kirkham, aka Zoid, the cameraman for Ski Sunday, who was for a long time my work husband, a brilliant cameraman who I trusted and did such good work for the BBC. He became their Ski Sunday, their Winter Olympic, then their Summer Olympic, then their Commonwealth, then their Wimbledons, then bits of F1, and then he branched out from there. He's just an incredible features cameraman, but we got out of... He lives in the Mount, or he did. He's moved to Europe now with the sort of collapse of terrestrial media. He's gone closer to the source now, like a lot of people in film and TV. But at the time, he was based in New Zealand, and we left New Zealand. Shemi Alcott left France, and we based ourselves in Largs in Switzerland, where they had the kind of financial backing you need to implement exceptional COVID controls that the BBC were happy with. And we ran Ski Sunday that season as a 3-person crew.
From Largs?
Out of 3 apartments in Largs. We were socially isolating in these apartments because you couldn't risk at any point one of us going down and infecting the other 2. And we were the only BBC production happening out of Manchester, out of Media City, let alone out of the UK.
Because that was their preference, I think, wasn't it, at the time? They were like, okay, you guys can come in here and we'll shoot it in studio and we'll just basically...
And you'll isolate in Media City and we'll just create a bubble for this crew.
Yeah.
And we said, no, it doesn't work like that. So we had...
Well, theoretically it could have, but it wouldn't have been a lot of fun for you guys, right? I know where I would rather be
and if
at
you've
Largs
got
or Manchester.
And we had the option.
Yeah.
We were like, we've got the option here. So the eyes of the BBC are on us. Can these people manage this? Can they be trusted? Can you run a show? 10 days in, I hit a tree stump and wrapped my knee around it. I broke my tibial plateau, snapped the MCL and the ACL clean and dislocated the kneecap. And we made a decision between the series producer and us that we would keep that on the down low. So I was braced up. We shot all the links from that point on from around the main Galaxy building at the top of the cable car so I could get to it. I had surgery just before I had it just after the penultimate show. So I had 3 days recovery, and then we got up to the highest point we could on snow with this throbbing leg.
Having not told head office at all that this is all
I think head office, I don't know whether the heads knew, but the series producer knew. But we got the whole series away, and then I had quite an enjoyable MIQ back in New Zealand. I was I can't remember the name of the hotel, but it overlooks the race course in Rotorua. So it was a pretty 70s, maybe 80s hotel, but it had a hot tub piped from the thermal water up onto the deck, and I could see the race course from the deck, so I could elevate my foot in this hot tub and get the TAB app. I was only betting $1 or $2, but yeah, I did my physio every day, did a couple of podcasts with people, and I would have been doing physio anywhere else, but it was, that one was manageable. But it was, we've got every season of Ski Sunday away for 20 years, come hell or high water. And I think we proved then what we could do with the show and what it means to people. And the Winter Olympics is always an extension of that show. And I tried very hard. I think I arrived maybe a little too late, but I tried to build the same model in New Zealand with Winter Games. I said, look, you can wrap an arm around that mainstream snow community because it is a big community and the culture's so rich with snow. I truly believe it's one of the only pastimes, like beyond sport, where you can get 3 generations doing it for the whole day. Name me another sport where you can have kids, parents and grandparents doing it. Like tennis, yes, you can do it, but a couple of hours, everyone's shattered. You don't go to the tennis. Maybe you do go to the tennis courts and hang out for the day. Golf, pretty close, but you're still not active together, enjoying the same thing, but getting what you need from it. Where the grandparents are sight skiing, the parents might be with the grandparents, the parents might be chasing the kids. The kids are ripping around, going absolutely nuts. And then you all meet up on the chair, or you all go down to the cafe. You have a barbecue in the car park, whatever, however you do it. There's very few things where everyone can do it. And Ski Sunday, the audience figures prove that. It is destination viewing for families. And the messages we get are so similar to my own experiences, where the parents are like, right, we're going to go and do this. It shows people who don't come into contact with the mountains, this environment that gives them something that they never could have dreamed of. And you know it, the power of an alpine environment to broaden horizons literally and metaphorically is unrivaled.
How long did it take you before you felt really comfortable in that role? It's like, because I can imagine it's like, because that is, I mean, BBC is the establishment, and to come from, from a core sport, but to be aspiring to get into the establishment and to represent your sport within the establishment. You're under a lot of pressure in that sort of situation. You're the freak who's flying the flag high internally. You're a different exotic fruit compared to everybody else internally. How long did that take before you started to, or are you not yet there? Is it still you sort of feel that,
I think you've got the intersection of two, you've described brilliantly there, two different facets of what makes anyone good. I think you've got that precocious, almost arrogance when you come into a role that you can do something and that the people there don't know.
They don't know how to do it.
They don't know snowboarding. So
Like
from my
do,
side,
yes.
I came in as this precocious, arrogant snowboarder. You don't know how to cover snowboarding. And then there's the experienced, measured broadcaster that you can, well, I say broadcaster, the experience and the understanding, the mastery of a profession that only comes with your Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hours. So I arrived in 2006 at the Olympics, and to give you, I described it to a friend at the time as like blowing dust off people in the MBC, which is the Mountain Broadcast Centre. You have two hubs at the Winter Olympics, the IBC down in the city, which would be Turin in 2006, it would be Sochi in Russia, it would be Pyongyang in Korea. Then you have the MBC, which is the Mountain Broadcast Centre, and that's up where they're doing. It'll be interesting in France to see where they put that, because it's lots of different areas. But in Turin, it was up in this, where was it, Sestriere. And I went in there, and it was just a load of it was a load of old people that I didn't see as having any connection to winter sport, let alone snowboarding. And I was right, they didn't have a connection to winter sport, but the expertise in creating mainstream shows, those stunning openers and closers, if you watch the World Cup from 2026, the quality of the edits we got. Here comes my wife, loudest voice in the world, TN.
Oh, I'm so sorry. We're all out.
Oh, good.
No, see you later.
Hi.
It's like having some kind of aura. I can tell where my wife is on the mountain just by listening.
All right. Yes,
It's like she's got a yodel.
Yeah.
You've got that. We were talking about the quality of highlights edits now that you generally get from sporting events is dreadful. It's the one thing. You go back to the BBC and think 2006, before the digital revolution had started, a lot of stuff still analog, shot on tapes. The level of expertise required to keep an Olympics live from a remote mountain broadcast hub. I just didn't understand any of that. All I saw was, you're not going to represent my sport properly. I'm here to do it properly. You watch me go.
Which went down like a cup of cold sick with those experienced professionals who were having the dust blown off them, or how welcoming and gracious were they at this precocious newcomer that come into their midst?
The behind the scenes crew that's a lovely word, gracious. They were incredibly gracious with this young upstart. Claire Balding, the BBC's sort of figurehead for live broadcasting, an incredible savant when it comes to broadcasting. She's immense. But she, after one of the snowboard broadcasts, I could hear her in my headphones. She said, "Okay, and now back to the real sports," which was a dagger through the heart at the time, because no matter how much you see yourself as a core sport on that stage, you are looking for acceptance. You want the sport to do itself justice and to be considered alongside the downhill and the figure skating and to be a part of that family. So that hurt at that time. But there was a moment in there, really, really pivotal moment for me. I knew from what I described earlier as that university period of doing live events and learning how to describe my sports to mainstream audiences. I knew I could do that. And I think it was the snowboard cross first, new event in Turin in 2006. And I had a producer sat next to me, and we had to get up and get on buses. I didn't have a car or anything. We were at the bottom of the pile. We had to get on buses at 3:45 to get from Sestriere to Bardonecchia for the snowboard events. And we'd do 2 or 3 buses through the main stops to get there at 7:30 a.m. And then I'd have 2 hours to go through the media centre, get all of the sheets and get all of my notes together. And we sat down and we started doing the racing. And I started getting excited. And the producer was like trying to make these calm down gestures at me while we were going. And I remember looking across and going, just making a little face at her and going, "We're going for this." And I just kept winding up. And after that moment, I think it was a couple of events after that, I'd made my decision, I'm doing this my way, whether it works or not. And I got called in by an editor, lovely man, Charlie Cope. And at the BBC, an editor is like a director. They're making the editorial, they're not just stitching stuff together with the director telling them, they're making the editorial calls. And Charlie was one of the most experienced, but a lovely, gentle, soft-spoken man who understood how things might change. He had a really open mind. And he took me into one of the back rooms after 2 or 3 broadcasts, and he said, "Come and have a look at this." And the BBC is a publicly funded broadcaster, so they have to respond to anyone who writes to them because they're essentially publicly owned by the licence fee payer. And he had a folder on this computer out the back just filled with all of the audience emails. So he took me to the snowboarding folder and he said, "Have a read of these." And it makes me a little bit emotional now. It was just, you don't get that anyway. I suppose you do get it now. You can see the replies, but it was like validation of what I'd thought there, this risk I'd taken. I'd been given the BBC opportunity. I'd decided to do it my way. And then there was this stack of emails going, "Oh my God, give us more of this. We love this. Who's this guy? What's happening?" And I was like, oh, thanks, Charlie.
From punters or from core
Punters.
snowboarders people?
Punters.
Awesome.
Yeah, I was getting the odd I was getting text messages from mates like, "Oh my God, it's blowing up. This is in..." Snowboarding was going somewhere where no one had thought it could go in the UK. So that was beautiful. And that gave me the confidence. I got it wrong in Vancouver. I got a friend in, they started giving me a bit more license, asking if I wanted guests in.
Based on the success of 2006? Or of
2006, and I'd been invited on Ski Sunday in 2007. And after a couple of teething problems in 07 and 08, I started to find my feet there and build some ownership. The BBC gave us a Top Gear style spin-off series in 09, which broadcast in 10. So we had Ski Sunday, the Olympics in Vancouver, and this high altitude spin-off series.
This was you travelling the world doing the cool shit that you basically figured out, hey, this would be fun to do, but I haven't got the budget to do it myself. And yeah.
Well, the BBC started
awesome.
The second season of Ski Sunday. I said to them after the first one, I said, "Look, can you give me a bit of money?" And I came down to New Zealand, did a piece on Snowpark, a ski resort that's just a snow park. And then I said, in New Zealand's one of those rare countries you can go skateboarding, surfing and snowboarding in a day. So I did those 2 films and took them back to the BBC, and they said, these are brilliant. Can you do more of these? So I wrote a list in 2007, the end of 2007. I stole an idea off a mate. I said, I want to go from Moscow to Novokuznetsk on the Siberian Express and go to Siberia's most remote resorts. Because Putin at the time was giving mining permits to anyone who built a ski resort. He wanted to build a domestic ski industry. So there were these insane mining towns, 8 hours train from anywhere, with ski fields. It was one of the most insane trips. We went sandboarding in Morocco, climbed Mount Atlas, tested all the new powder snowboard designs that were coming out, sort of rocket board, tapered board, old school swallowtails with helicopters. Did all of these amazing films. Went and did Japan, just showed people how that crazy Japanese powder system worked. Did a lot of incredible films, but that was building confidence and letting me understand mainstream broadcasting, and a lot of it didn't hit. Some of it did. High Altitude didn't hit. It was of its time. It was a very blokey challenge show, but I rue that the opportunity came so quickly. If we'd have waited and if someone gave me an hour-long slot on primetime BBC, which is what we got for High Altitude now, I could make a proper show for it. But that came too soon. And it was a little bit reductive and childish. And I say that with all due respect to the producers, who are brilliant, who put that together. But that was just of its age. And we were running, that Top Gear style format, I feel, was running its time out at that point.
Are those opportunities finished now in terms of for the sport? That was just a unique period of time and constellation of events and processes and opportunities.
I think for anything like a terrestrial channel, yes. The TVNZs, BBCs, SRFs of the world, ABCs, NBCs, they're never going to make a show like that now. But what we're seeing is the democratization of that content creation. And if you want to make if you made Ski Sunday for YouTube, I think it could work really well. I think there's a massive market for a mainstream snow show, but just not, no one has the advertising budget from terrestrial broadcasters to do that anymore. They won't take a risk. The terrestrial broadcasting is it's being reduced now to these awful mainstream reality formats and then bets on big sporting events that will return a subscription fee or enough viewers to warrant it. And then soap operas, it's like this, it's like watching the dinosaurs die in slow motion with terrestrial TV. It's so painful. The BBC, Ski Sunday may be on the ropes. Like we know, BBC have got £160 million worth of cuts to make this year. And I know that Ski Sunday will be part of that conversation. So,
how do you approach it then as a production company? I used to work for a production company in Germany and used to regularly get stressed because I would be trying to convince my bosses that we should be producing our own things. How do you approach that? So with an event like Natural Selection mountain biking, it's an event that you have a stake in, that it's like, what's the role
all
of
good
a
is
service provider? And
that's an interesting one. We started off as a stakeholder because we got government funding. So we had a responsibility. Only New Zealand companies can run that. So the traditional model is that we run with All Good. Generally, you're an event property, you bring in the sport, and we'll build you the venue, and if you want, a broadcast team, and you just lay the sport and your model over the top of that. Because if you go back and look at something like X Games in its heyday, like late 2000s, early 2010s, they were taking 50, 60 people from ESPN around the world to Barcelona, to Tokyo, to Teen, to build this uniform model in different places. That's not sustainable anymore. You have to have an executive team that you bring in who work with the local team. And New Zealand's got it right in that respect. If you want government funding, you have to use a certain amount of local talent to make that work. And then you see the return on it, the government's return on investment in the local community. So Snow League, Natural Selection come in. If they want government funding, they have to give back to the community. So you'll see a lot of local operators being used in that respect. And I think that's a strong model. But for all good, we haven't built our own thing with that. As an individual, as Ed Leigh, I've got a couple of very small things. We had Winter Olympics in Livigno back on European snow. So for the BBC, it was a big hit again. You regularly seeing top 5 viewing figures in the 4 to 5 million range. And Tim Warwood and I had 5 of the top 6 events for those viewing figures. So that, like, wrapping an arm, taking core snowboarding and free skiing, but wrapping an arm around a mainstream audience and showing them what it can be. We know that works. And we delivered the BBC an audience that they crave, a younger audience, and then returning viewers to their streaming platform, iPlayer, who haven't been on the streaming platform in 6 months. We delivered those audiences. I had high hopes again. I thought, it's the first Winter Olympics on a close time zone since Sochi in 2014. We smashed it, got these big numbers, and the trail goes dead for them. They know those cuts are coming probably, and they just don't want to take a risk on niche sports. So at that point, you're like, okay, we have to do it now. Even if we only get 10% of that audience, 300, 400,000 people would be vast in a slot for us. So we're chasing that. That's what we're going to go and have a go at. So to your question, I'm 20 years into this, since I started messing around with a microphone at live events. I've got the confidence to try something on my own.
And are probably now at the point where you are starting to be seen as the establishment now, right? In terms of depending on who you're working with, is here's this old dude that knows all about broadcasting, rather than here's this young punk that's going to tell us how it's all going to work. It's maybe a different role and stage for you, right?
Yeah, we talked about it, didn't we? The intersection of the precocious arrogance that comes in, and then that sort of expertise and understanding as you spend more time in it. The crossroads for that was 2014. I think a friend messaged me, and I have this understanding that I have quite a nasal estuary English voice, and I was very conscious of that. And he said, "Oh, it's so lovely to hear your voice." We were talking about something. He was the editor of White Lines at the time, Ed Blomfield, and I said, "Yeah, I never feel like I hold that much gravitas with this estuary English." And he said, "No." He said, "It doesn't matter what your voice sounds like. It's the fact that it's you. I know I'm in safe hands. I feel like I'm going to get the right voice, an expert voice talking me through what's happening." And that really helped me relax. And I thought, I started to understand that it's not about necessarily what you look like, how you sound. It's about familiarity. And if you have that, if you're the hardest thing in broadcasting is getting enough time to get good. I've seen 2 people walk in and be supremely confident and look like they've mastered it straight away, and one of those was really high on drugs. So it's really abnormal. No one starts, like, you can have a lot of confidence, but you're going to get humiliated. But if you're lucky enough to build up slowly, I think it's a curse being thrown into a very big show of any kind, any medium, straight away, because the likelihood of you succeeding is lower. You almost want this slow organic build up so that you can learn your craft, so that as you do build a bigger and bigger audience, you've got more authority and gravitas. And then by the time I got that, I'd already put in, you can argue I'd put in a decade before I got the Olympics. If I'd have got the Olympics in 2002, it might not have happened for me. I might have been too raw and too angry and had too much of a point to prove. But I got given long enough by 2014, 8 years in, to BBC broadcasting, I felt like I was starting to get my head around what the role was all about. And certainly Livigno, I said a lot less. And what it meant was I had more time to think about what I said. So when I do say something, it's better. That's the best part. That was the most magical part of working that out. It's like, oh, I can say less, think more, and it's better.
Did you feel a sense of responsibility to the sport, and did people make you aware of that from the sport? I mean, I remember like a lot of early snowboarding footage coverage, particularly I had a huge challenge with this with the domestic broadcasters here, was showing people crashing.
Yep.
Because that was this spectacular, and that was hey, this is extreme sport was how they were presenting it, and extreme sport looking at these people doing these ridiculous crashes, and it's just like, hey, you've taken the 4 crashes of the 100 rides, and that's what you're showing rather than the amazing tricks that people are landing.
And then even if they've taken it, the MTV style guy in the sky shot from the late 90s where there's no frame of reference, the cameraman twists the camera around, so the host broadcaster's giving them an absolute pile of rot to work with anyway. It took me a long time with the BBC, and Ski Sunday for a long time was used as this almost reward for the promising young producers coming up. So we'd get high turnover of producers. So I was trying to teach new people every year these values. But my biggest ally, he started only a year or two after me, was an editor. And I talked about how important the editor's role was at the BBC. They so key to what coverage goes out, and he learned and took the time to, and would ask me, are these shots okay, are we getting it right here? And I've been able to, it's a long journey, it's a lot of trust, and I felt that responsibility, but I didn't feel like I had the agency in the early days to really push that and assert myself. But by 2012, 2013, 5-6 years in, I was starting to get there, and I had a lot more authority. I felt like I was more a part of the team, and producers would come and speak to me. And I've had difficult years. There was for the first time in a long time, there was a series producer change a couple of years ago, and the guy who's there now is an awesome guy. But we had a bit of a set to, because our Larks Open is the only event that we kind of falls within the series' run, and it looked like we were going to lose it. I was like, why am I here? Like, what am I doing if we don't have that?
Lose the rights to it?
Yeah.
Right.
What do we do with this? And that was the first time I'd really put my foot down, and it was really awkward, because he'd just come in and he was trying to get his feet under the table, and he'd inherited a difficult rights deal, and I was probably a little bit too hard on him, but I needed him to understand what it meant, and we've had the rights every year since. So.
Well, it's the thing. I mean, you come to a role like that, you don't know that. Well, okay, you'll be looking at those list of events and the costs associated with acquiring the rights to each of them, and some that will be coming as a package, and you'll be getting 3 events, and this will be one, and you won't realise, well, actually, this is the Wimbledon of snowboarding right here. So I can forget about all the others if I don't do this deal, because I need to have that. But it's like, if you're coming to it fresh, how are you going to know that, right?
Yeah,
so.
And it's so hard. I hope we're coming out of the other side of it, but there's so many streaming services now. There's this company called Viaplay who've bought bundles of stuff, and I can't remember they're based out of Scandinavia or Benelux, I think, but they've bought bundles of sports, and they get the ones they want, and they get all this other stuff with it, and they don't care about the bottom end stuff. And the Larks Open is one of those that they've ended up with the UK live rights to. And they just won't even answer emails when you try and have a discussion about getting highlights rights off them. They're just not interested. This is just some lowly thing that's getting in the way. And that is I think that's the biggest challenge. action and adventure sports face. Coming back to our Olympic conversation, how do you stop the Olympics being the be all and end all, and the only way mainstream audiences and brands get involved is getting better coverage, more universal coverage in one place? I think it's what the UCI and mountain biking got right under Red Bull. I think now under Warner Brothers Discovery and the seemingly endless acquisitions that seem to be miring that group, and then the paywall that's stuck in, under Red Bull, you could watch downhill mountain biking with the world's best voices, most authoritative voices in Rob Warner, Elliot Jackson, Claudio, whoever it was on those broadcasts. You knew where it was, and you could slot in. I think that was one of the best in class. WSL as well. If you want to watch surfing now, there's great surfing products out there. There were great mountain biking products out there.
Yeah, a lot of it is, I guess, the age of the sport, right? That it's still relatively young, and you've got things that are happening compared to a sport like football, where it's just like, that's the system, and here are the rights, and there are the organisations, and that's who you deal with. I can remember talking to a tech entrepreneur in Miami who'd acquired Tom Sims's company, and is back in the late 90s, and as part of that deal, Tom Sims had protected World Snowboarding Championships in North America. And so this guy had bought this company, and one of the properties was this, and we would quite like to organise the World Snowboarding Championships in North America, and you can't do it if this guy's got the title to it. So, and that's the thing, for a more established sport, you're not having to deal with those sorts of red herrings that then make it very difficult for things like broadcasting.
But then you almost, with football, you get to the other end of the spectrum where it's a victim of its own success. And they're selling rights in the UK through 4 different providers. So if you want to watch all of the Premiership, you have to buy Amazon, BT, Sky, and God knows what else, DAZN or whatever it is. Like, it's just a mess. But snowboarding's at the other opposite end of the spectrum, where people ask me after the Olympics, I've got streams I could show you. Like, I think I picked up 15, 20,000 followers during the Olympics. So many people just saying, where do I go? How do I get more snowboarding? Where can I watch this? I'm like, okay, so you got Natural Selection on Red Bull TV. It's going to happen in a couple of weeks' time. I'm going to Snow League after that. That's on NBC, and you might get highlights on. Then I just want to turn it on and be able to watch it. So we've got it's so splayed out now. Like, you've got Snow League, you've got X Games, both behind these weird American rights deals, which means that you might be able to get them if you're in New Zealand on YouTube because it's not geo-blocked, but Europe maybe has a geo-block. NST's the only one that's out there, and that's Red Bull TV. So Red Bull TV, if they went out and threw the money at it just to get all of the FIS stuff, all of the NST stuff, all of the Snow League stuff, I don't think they'd be able to get X Games, but if they got all of that and lumped it together, so you're like, right, I got a Red Bull for snow, as you did with mountain biking, it would be such a masterstroke.
The start of the BBC gig, I think, was the point where you and your wife Sian decided, okay, maybe start to put a little bit of a toe back in the New Zealand waters, and establish a base, I think, by close to Sian's parents in Auckland initially. Was that right? Back around in the day?
It's actually, so our daughter Suki was born. Yes, yeah, it was. So Suki was born in August 2006, so just after the Winter Olympics. And when Sian and I got together in 2001, she'd said to me, look, I'm going back to New Zealand. Within 2 months, she didn't want there to be any ambiguity. So she just said, look. And I was fine. I was like, yeah, great. And I was so into it. I was like,
having been to New Zealand at that point, or
nope,
it was nothing?
Never been.
Okay, yeah.
And I came for the first time in 2002. And we just drove around North and South Island in a camper van and saw the whole country. And the romantic thing to say would be I fell in love with it.
That wasn't the reality?
I fell in love with a holiday. Like, it was a great holiday, but in the background there all the time was,
could I live here?
How can I make it work here? I've built this in she said 4 years. She actually gave me 5 years in the end. So I was very lucky. Because she said 2 months. I said, give me 3 or 4 years to do what I need to do, which I haven't thought about it. But the fact that I said that to her means that I probably...
You were planning.
I didn't understand it at the time, but I probably did have a plan. So I got that. I never would have dreamed it would have been the BBC, but I did want to be... I'd kind of got the TV presenter thing off the ground. The BBC had happened, and I think that gave me... Suki was born in August. We were living in Brighton, but Suki had been born in New Zealand. She didn't automatically get Sian's citizenship. She automatically... Weirdly, I hope this has changed now, but you automatically get your father's citizenship, not your mother's. So Sian's mum's a midwife. So we came back. She was born in New Zealand. We went back. We had a house in Brighton in the lanes, in Hanover Hill, Museley Mountain, which was close to the train station. So I could get to Gatwick or London. It was really easy life for me. And I went away to Dallas for one of those. It was like X Games. Can't remember what it was. It was called. Maybe it was Mountain Dew. One or whatever it was. I went away, I came back, and she'd got the house already starting to pack up. She got Suki in one arm. She's like, I'm going back to New Zealand. Are you coming? I was like, drop the TV, drop your weapon. It's fine. I'm going. That was it. Her line was, I've put the house on the market. I'm going back to New Zealand. 10 days on her own with a newborn. And I was like, I have pushed her to her absolute limit and beyond. This isn't fair. So I knew it was my turn to make sacrifice. I'd done the Olympics. I think the discussion around Ski Sunday was starting. So there was something, and little did I know it, Ski Sunday became my insurance policy. Media famously goes on holiday for Christmas. You get a long Christmas, New Year break. And media would come back to work in early January, and I'd be on TV at 6:30 on a Sunday night, and people would remember you or think about you. And Ski Sunday became... I'd start Ski Sunday very often with not much work booked for the year, if any. And then by the time I'd finish that series, I'd have something that looked like a framework of work put together.
And so you would leave, so New Zealand was home base, you'd fly back up to Europe then and basically do a solid chunk of that European winter. So from the first events, probably Sölden, those kind of events.
Ski Sunday was a very strict 8-week run. So I'd fly back somewhere just before or just after New Year, depending on where your first Sunday of the year fell, and I'd run 8 weeks. But Sian and I made a deal that it was really no more than 7 weeks. So if I was very tight with it, we could kind of do it in 7.5 weeks. But that was, you start to lose each other around that time. It doesn't matter how much you talk, your routines become separate. You are not a part of each other's lives anymore. I mean, the most punishing part of it is that living in New Zealand, January, February is school holidays. So until the kids were 9 and 7, I didn't have a summer holiday with them. And then we moved to Verbier and did 3 years in Verbier. I got a long-term contract offer from Red Bull. And we started living on the same hemispheres a little more. But yeah, those early years were hard, but we lived very close. You moved to this, arguably one of the world's most beautiful countries, a heaven for action sports, but we moved to suburbia on the North Shore, which was a huge shift for me. I'd always lived either in quite liberal, vibrant cities or the mountains or beaches. I'd never ever lived in suburbia. I'd grown up in a very rural, like free, open community. And you knew Sian, you got your kids, you got your in-laws. I'd done seasons,
right?
Sian,
friends in Auckland.
Yeah, sure. I actually met Sian through some of our friends doing seasons in Val d'Isère. I bumped into them in '96, and she came over to visit them. And she lost them on the mountain, bumped into an Australian friend of mine. He came in to the apartment that night and was like, I've met the woman you're going to marry. I was like, really? He's like, yeah, she's coming to Dick's tonight, the nightclub. come out and see her. She's fucking mental. It's like, okay. Went out, met her, backflipped off the wall to try and impress her on the dance floor, which is something I've never done before. And I tore my ACL. It's the beginning of my knee problems. And she just went, you're funny. Nice to meet you. And left. And I didn't see her for 5 years.
5 years?
Yep.
Holy shit.
And then she fancied my best friend. So we went out that night when I saw her again. And I was like, I kind of said to her, we ran up the road. My mate had passed down. We ran up the road. She said, oh, you're so much fun. I said, look, I'll be really honest with you. I fancied you since that nightclub in 1996. And if you go out with my best friend, we're not going to be friends, but this is going to be extremely difficult for me. So, and she kind of looked a bit crestfallen, but definitely didn't put her off. But my friend wasn't that into her. He's a little more sedate. He told me, I said to him, are you into her? He's like, no, she's mental. She never slows down. I was like, oh, could I get her phone number or her email? He's like, no, that'd be weird.
But well managed though. So you retained the friendship and you got the girl.
Yeah, it took quite a long time to convince her and not be super creepy. But
and I hope she remembered the backflip, like with an injury like that. It wasn't like, oh no, I don't remember. She did remember. And what was the injury?
I made
and pain?
an impression.
Yeah, I mean the pain afterwards. Obviously, I mean I'm assuming there's a bit of alcohol involved. How much did you try to carry that away? I
had my wallet in my mouth, biting down. That was extremely. I had landed in someone's. My first knee injury was not a single point moment. It was landing in biggest cliff I've ever done, a huge step down about 20 meters. I landed in the corner of someone's bomb hole, and that definitely set it off. And then I did that with Sian, backflipping off the wall, and then I think I was in a local Val d'Isère comp, won the border cross, and then did the big air and landed. The lunatic, same mate who'd introduced me to Sian, thought that if you got the cat to push, if the landing was flat, you just push some kind of boulders of snow onto the landing and that had softened things up. Thinking back in 96, I landed on one of those snow boulders and it clicked and tore the knee, and then that was the end of it. So it was a slow attrition, but I could have fixed the knee, knowing what I know now about physio and conditioning. I could have fixed the knee after any one of those and it would have been fine with just a little bit of work. But
what is your body telling you now? So you have a big night, you're getting out of bed at 4 o'clock in some sifty Italian pensione. What's your body telling you after those sorts of injuries and this life?
Sian got ill in 2011 from the breakneck lifestyle we were leading. She was managing 2 kids on her own and a husband who was gallivanting around the world. And part of the move to Verbier was getting her out of running her own business and managing 2 kids with an absent husband. We put a cap on my travel at 6 months, but 6 months on your own, even with her parents lived just down the road, which was why we lived in Torbay. But even then it was hard work and she got chronic fatigue. So she started healing herself with food. Realised that she was nearly celiac, not clinically celiac, but some pretty heavy symptoms from gluten. So I could see that while she was stuck in New Zealand with the business hanging over a post-GFC fashion distribution business, she was running WSC for Ingmar Backman and Gregor Hagland's Swedish company. We'd gone over there and we imported that into New Zealand, or Sian did. And that was just weighing on her. So I got this Red Bull contract. We moved the family out to Switzerland and she did this. The friend who'd helped her heal herself through food showed her the course that she'd done, this INN course on nutrition. And she started learning about gut health. And that's been an ongoing project. She's done a lot of different stuff, but she's a registered health professional working in holistic health treatment, is specialising in gut health. And she has, I'm getting to the point of this, I promise.
All good.
She's used me as a project for a lot of her theories. So we got to the point where Suki and Oscar, the kids, have got gluten intolerances as well. They're not just great on it. Oscar's not great on lactose. He's got a load of different allergies. And rather than cooking 2 different or even 3 different meals in an evening, it's like, look, we'll just eat the same food. So around 2017, I started eating, like knocking gluten out of my diet. And while I was at home. And then the penny dropped. I went on a trip. And I'd got all of these injuries. I'd deal with aches, pains when things got cold. There'd be inflammation if I was riding hard anywhere, skating hard. And I went on a trip through America, and we did Boston, New York, Kentucky for some Red Bull shoots. And I just smashed the gluten. I was in the fried chicken and the bourbon and the subs. And I came home feeling dreadful. Then I got back on the gluten-free diet, and I'd been mountain biking a lot in Verbier through that summer, and I'd noticed before I'd been on that trip, I was like, I feel 21. I feel light, I feel sharp and fast. And I'd been she was doing a yoga instructing, so I was doing a bit of yoga with her. And I got back, after that trip, I got back gluten-free, started doing more yoga, and the penny dropped. I was like, look after your body, it starts working well. And I know that Diary of a CEO, Stephen Bartlett's got some shit for this, for having a glass of wine. And that's at the pointy end of the stick. But the more you start looking after yourself, the better you feel. And that becomes addictive. Now, I'm far from any saint. I fucking love a gin and tonic. And I have a threshold of about 5 drinks where I cannot think about anything else except for a roll-up when I get there. I probably have between 50 and 100 roll-ups a year, but I've decided not to beat myself up about it. I live in Wānaka. I get some of the cleanest air in the world. I'm like, okay, so maybe it's like living in Birmingham air quality now. But on the whole, I have a really strict... Sean's got me down to some pretty strict food, but I don't notice it because the food we do cook is delicious, but there's no gluten, there's no sugar. And I mean, no fruit, no fructose. There's bits of lactose in there, but almost no sugar, apart from the odd gin and tonic or beer. And then I don't do caffeine. And my body I'll do 20 minutes, half an hour of Pilates. I'll do some knee strengthening exercises pre-season. And I can skate, snowboard and mountain bike as hard as I was in my mid-30s now. And I feel like you can party as much as you like till as old as you like, but there is a definite stop somewhere where you can't drop a 6-metre cliff. You can't do cat track drops at full speed off triple treat. You can't hit 15-metre kickers up at Cardi's. And I can see those days. Maybe they're still in triple figures. Maybe they're in double figures. I don't know. But I want to make the most of those. And anything that's going to help me do that for longer, I will do. And the way I'm riding at the moment, I'm so pleased with. I'm really... I'm in awe of what my body's letting me do now. With just when I say it out loud, no sugar, no gluten, they feel like giant sacrifices to people. And I watch Sian with clients where she tells people, right, you can't eat gluten anymore. And she's like, the reaction always, these people have hit rock bottom with their health, and still the reaction is like, oh, I don't know if I can do that. If I could show them how easy it is to make a chicken stock at the start of the week, to eat largely just vegetables and meat, not too many processed foods. It's the tiny compromises I've made for these giant gains in how I'm able to skate, mountain bike, surf and snowboard. It's just like there's no contest for me. It's so easy.
Have you been able to introduce similar, processes or systems for your relationship, and looking at other people's relationships? How do you think the way that you guys have structured yours, and by your enforced absence each year, how do you think that's created perhaps a unique relationship and bond for your entire family?
Oh, That's a huge question. Such far-reaching implications, because Sian is a voracious learner. She is addicted to learning. Like, she has a podcast in her ears all day. Every podcast you can think of around health, wellness, and like she's doing a master's in how screen use before bedtime will affect sleep patterns in tweens and teens. Like, there's what she's taking on constantly. She is just driving forward at breakneck pace for progressive understanding of health. I feel sometimes, when you're in a water skiing boat and someone lets go of the rope and it's bouncing around behind the boat, that's me. I'm that handle at the back of the boat that's never going to catch up and is semi-drowning at the back. She has to remind herself to let me catch up sometimes. She's been doing a lot of work on ADHD this year, and I will come back from a trip and suddenly 100% of the topic of conversation is ADHD and how I am now ADHD. I'm undiagnosed.
You yourself or
apparently
Shana's?
I am massively ADHD, but I came back and was just informed that I am now, because she's light years ahead of me. She's informing me that the whole family has ADHD and these are the traits and this is where they show up. And sure enough, with the kids, there's definitely something there. And I would say that she has it. I don't think it's a negative thing necessarily. And as so many people are seeing now, it's a superpower and when you harness it and understand it. But I'm starting to get my head around, maybe I'm not a brilliant listener, that I love the sound of my own voice. I can talk and my brain works fast. I've got a fast mouth and my brain still works faster than my mouth. So I'm playing catch up. But then at the same time, Sian is so independent and wonderfully happy with her own company and keeps herself busy. The absences, I see a lot of friends. I remember watching relationships in the 90s and early 2000s when girlfriends and boyfriends would hook up with people who didn't understand season air lifestyle. And it looks so, you must have seen it, it looks so glamorous on the outside. But when you actually start seeing the reality of, right, we live in the mountains, we're not going to earn a whole lot of money, you're going to travel a lot, so I either have to find a job that allows me to travel with you or I have to be comfortable without you. And Sian has never once put any pressure on me anywhere around. There's a couple of times, but even I've known it at that point. We both know, as I mentioned earlier, that distance being created between you. But my parents supported me unequivocally to follow, because they'd followed their passions. They did the same for us as kids. And there was some mild judgment when we started stepping over the line occasionally, but largely they supported us, and Sian has done exactly the same thing. And maybe subconsciously that was something that I fell in love with, this real freedom and respect for each other's individual passions. But we talk about this a lot. Sian and I still make at least one day a week where we go up and shred together. And it's as much fun as it was when we were in our 20s. If you have something like, we go up and rip round Cardi's or TC, and she still rips. She absolutely fangs down the hill. And we enjoy each other's snowboarding so much, and it kind of transports you back to that 20s era. We're sort of newly in love, the excitement, all of that. We still have that. We still share that. And I will never underestimate the value that has for being able to connect instantly as a couple. It's wonderful.
You're still the one, though, that's made the cultural sacrifice in terms of living in Sian's culture and Sian's country. So your kids aren't going to be growing up with dry slope rashes. But what are the things that perhaps that you got as a kid that you're like, a bit of a bummer that they didn't get to experience that?
So my mum described this the other day. She said that by the age of 4 or 5, she could see I just wanted to leave. I wanted out of there. The world that I grew up in was not big enough for me. And I remember having as soon as I found skateboarding at 11, there was a kid moved into our village, Simon Tissington, and he did an ollie in front of me. And it was like seeing magic. I'd been around skateboards, but the idea that a skateboard could leave the ground without straps or holding it was magic, just sheer magic. That was Gandalf styles to me. So I was in love with that, and skateboarding was happening somewhere else, so I had to leave. And I have had this, I mentioned earlier that New Zealand wasn't love at first sight for me. It was a very slow burn, but I did fall in love with it. Surfing on the North Island especially, I got to spend Christmases and a lot of, sometimes a bit of January, depending on Ski Sunday, on the Coromandel, which I have a very soft spot for. But especially when we came down here in 2018 to the South Island, I feel more Kiwi than I do British now. And I've never been a Marmite and tea bags. I actually grew up as, I would say, a European first and a Brit second. By the time I was 17, I was in Greece and France all year, pretty much. I came home to earn a bit of money in the shoulder seasons. But so Brexit broke my heart. But
I was about to ask that, because
horrific. I'll tell that story later. But with going back to the kids, I think one of the things that's shaped the kids more than anything, they've, through my work and Sian and I's appetite for travel and passion to see the world, they've seen so much. They've spent time in Morocco, in all big cities across Europe. We took them to Paris, Barcelona, Munich. And they lived in Verbier. They saw a lot of Switzerland, parts of Austria. They've got a really broad frame of reference, and they moved a lot. And both kids are very settled. They want to put down roots now. Where Sian and I both couldn't wait to get out. They've, like most kids, fought that paradigm that the parents set for them and are much more homebody. But then you live in a place like Wānaka, that what more do you want here? Like, I thought that it maybe didn't have that rich an art scene. And then you get to see the theatre, the music, the art that happens here. Like, there's even a football culture down here. Like, that was the one thing I was ready to give up. I was like, oh, there won't be much football down here. And lo and behold, there's a whole troop of Liverpool supporters. So.
And so Brexit broke your heart then, because I was similar. I was really shocked. I was living in Germany at the time, and it felt so personal. It was a really strange one. So it was like, how did that feel for you at the time? Was it a real heartbreaker?
Yeah, we were living in Verbier, and the kids were at school in the local school, and it was very, very difficult. This is a wider conversation, but the kids ended up, there was this teacher, and she really didn't like Oscar, my youngest. He was 7 years old at the time, and I turned up at the school gate on the morning of the Brexit vote, and she came to the school gate, and she'd never done that. And she was hopping from foot to foot with excitement, and I was like, oh, she wants to have a word. Walking up with Oscar, he's a blonde-haired kid, and he's got a shock of white hair at the stress of having to go into this class every day and speak French, a classroom in language he doesn't understand. Julie, her name was, I can't remember her surname. And she came hustling up to me, and she said, I think Brexit is a good thing. I was like, oh yeah, why do you think that? And she said, I do not think cultures should mix.
Wow.
I stood there handing my New Zealand born son to her to teach for the day. I said, okay, thank you for clarifying that. And I started work on getting them into another school straight away. And there were, up until that point, what we came up against in Verbier was very interesting, but it was an expat community completely separated from a local community who would not integrate. And I justified it for a long time as maybe it was an extremely religious, isolated mountain community who'd been invaded by hedonistic billionaires. But we lived in Switzerland for 3 years, and what we saw there increasingly was this real lack of, they were absolutely, they didn't, what's the word I'm looking for? Begins with a D. They didn't, it'll come to me. Not segregation. When you legislate against someone. What's the word? Oi, where's your baby?
Like disadvantage, but like
you
discriminate.
Sid, shh. See if you can find our baby, Tom. Sorry, how much longer do you reckon we're going? These photos.
2 questions, basically.
Perfect.
Yeah.
2 questions left, Tom.
So sorry.
Don't worry.
You guys take your time.
What we found, I thought we'd got this. I originally thought it was a deeply religious, isolated mountain community that had been invaded by hedonistic billionaires. And then, so you'd got these 2 very different styles of thinking. But the more time we spent in Switzerland, I wrote a blog about it, and I got letters and correspondence from people in big cities who were having the same experiences. And the Swiss they were indiscriminate in their discrimination against foreigners. If you're a tourist, you're absolutely fine going in. But if you tried to live there, there was a barrier that you could never break.
Or even work there and commute. They're also the Germans that are coming across the border, and the French, I'm sure that it's like, yeah, they're not exactly
the French.
welcome.
I had French friends who got it almost worse than us, because the French were the immediate younger brother or sister that you could look down on. And the Portuguese were accepted on a degree, because it was almost as if they accepted their position as second-class agricultural workers, as the fruit pickers and the farm workers. But I was able to integrate in the local community, driving the mountain bike club and playing football. But other than that, we couldn't integrate, and we stopped trying. I had a neighbour who was 85. He'd moved from Orsières, 12 kilometres as the crow flies, when he was 12. And he'd never not been called an outsider in 73 years. So I thought, what are we even trying to do here? We can't win this battle. We have to step down from this one. So we did back away a little bit. But that was really tough. And for the kids, that was a very, very formative experience. And coming to Wānaka and experiencing the opposite was really important. That was one of the most wonderful things. We did 2015 to 18 in Verbier, came here in 2018, and the kids, Wānaka's a town full of immigrants, and it was just wonderful. It was seamless.
You're someone who's lived a really large life, including a lot of absences from your kids. Looking at them now and the role model that you've provided to them, what do you hope they'll take from having you as their dad?
Oh, that's a big one. I really hope that I've been able to do what my parents did and show them that a life lived with passion will be a fulfilling life. So if, without putting any expectation on them, but showing them how to live, that having faith that there's passion and work ethic there. My older brother struggled to find his passion originally, around 17 to 21 maybe. And that was a difficult transitional period for him. But I look at both of the kids now, and whether the passions they have now are what will carry through, no idea. But they have passion. And I think that's the most important thing. There are so many temptations or like distractions that can carry you away. But if you have a relatively wholesome passion that's not hurting anyone else, that I think you'll find your path in life by following that. I do believe that. I listened to someone recently who said, don't follow your passion like it's a dead end. And I think for some people that's maybe true, but I think Sian and I both have, there's two things that I think are key: work ethic and passion. And I'll add in there good manners. And those three things, I think if you're willing to work hard enough, then your passion will happen for you. So my son wants to be a rally driver. The likelihood of that happening is minute. But the chances of him being a driver of some kind, or maybe being a journalist in that space, or being an engineer or a designer, or whatever it is, finding a role that is in a realm that he loves, therefore doesn't feel like work, is what I would hope for them. And that's what I hope we've shown them, that whatever you want to do, if you work hard and you've got good manners, it'll probably happen for you.